two colonies. Same apiary, same nectar flow, same foundation added to the super on the same morning. 6 weeks later, one of those colonies has drawn white comb from the top bar down, frame after frame, the cells clean and deep and ready. The other hasn't touched it. The foundation hangs there the same way it was put in, maybe with a little brown wax along the top bar where the bees investigated and walked away. Both colonies looked strong at the inspection. Both queens were laying well, both had good populations, good stores, no disease pressure, and yet one drew comb and one didn't. Most beekeepers look at that result and reach for an explanation that feels reasonable. Weak genetics, a lazy queen, something off about that particular colony. Those explanations feel true because the result is real. But none of them are correct. The variable that separated those two colonies was invisible during the inspection. It existed in the demographic composition of the colony at the exact moment the foundation was added, and it was identified, observed, and named in 1915. The beekeepers who understood it treated drawn comb as a managed resource. The ones who didn't have been losing honey to it every season since, without ever knowing what they were losing or why. If this kind of biological reasoning changes how you read your colonies, a like on this video helps it reach the beekeepers who need it. And if you've ever pulled a super in late summer and found foundation that should have been drawn and wasn't, I'd be glad to hear about it in the comments. Open that hive in early July after a solid nectar flow. The bees are working. The supers were on in time. Everything looked right. But the foundation in that top super is still foundation. The bees have varnished the top bars with propolis. A few of them have been chewing at the wax sheet. But the cells aren't drawn. The honey isn't going in. And the flow isn't going to last much longer. That moment has a particular weight to it. The investment of the season, the timing of the supers, the quality of the colony, and still the result falls short of what it should have been. Most beekeepers carry that frustration without ever identifying its source. The cause was already set 6 weeks before they opened that super. It was set the morning they added the foundation. To understand what went wrong, it is necessary to understand something about beeswax that most beekeeping literature treats as a footnote. Wax is not a general colony product. It is not something any bee in the hive can produce at any time under sufficient motivation. Beeswax is a demographic product. It is produced by a specific subset of the colony's workforce during a specific window of those bees' adult lives, under specific thermal conditions. Outside that window, the capacity to secrete wax efficiently does not exist. The colony is not being uncooperative when it fails to draw comb. It is being asked to perform a biological function that its current workforce cannot perform at any meaningful rate. Here is the biology. Worker honeybees are born with wax glands. 4 pairs of them, positioned on the underside of the abdomen, between the overlapping plates of the exoskeleton. But those glands do not activate at emergence. A bee that has just hatched from her cell cannot produce wax. A bee that is 3 days old cannot produce wax efficiently. The glands develop progressively through the first week of adult life and reach full secretory capacity somewhere between day 12 and day 18. That is the window, 12 days after emergence to 18 days after emergence. After day 18, as the bee begins the physiological transition toward forager status, as her hypopharyngeal glands regress, as her flight muscles develop, as her behavioral orientation shifts outward toward the field, the wax glands begin their own decline. By the time she is making orientation flights, her wax secreting capacity is already diminishing. By the time she is a full forager, it is largely gone. That is not the only constraint. The wax glands, even when fully developed, require specific thermal conditions to function. Beeswax has a melting point of approximately 145 degrees Fahrenheit. But the secretion of wax by the glands requires the bee's abdominal temperature to be sustained in a range between 91 and 97 degrees. Below that range, wax secretion slows dramatically. The bees that produce wax do not do it while foraging in 60-degree morning air. They do it while clustered together in the interior of the hive, in close contact with the brood nest, where the colony maintains its thermal core. This is why comb drawing in a healthy colony happens from the inside of the hive outward, and why a colony that has lost thermal mass through a dearth, through population decline, through a summer cold snap, will stop drawing comb even when foundation is present and the beekeeper is certain conditions should be adequate. Population alone does not predict comb drawing capacity. This is where most beekeepers' intuition fails them. A colony of 60,000 bees sounds like a colony that should draw foundation with ease. But if the demographic composition of those 60,000 bees is weighted heavily toward foragers, experienced older bees in the peak of their field careers, the wax-producing fraction of that population may be surprisingly small. The colony looks strong. It is strong. But the specific workforce that produces wax is a minority within that strength, and if the foundation was added at the wrong moment in the colony's demographic cycle, that minority is working against a metabolic constraint that no amount of overall population can overcome. Most beekeepers have the instinct to add supers when the colony looks full. The bottom boxes are heavy, the bees are clustered across every frame. Traffic at the entrance is heavy. It looks like the time. And sometimes it is. But looking full and having the correct demographic composition to draw comb efficiently are two different conditions. They overlap sometimes. They do not overlap always. And the seasons where they don't overlap are the seasons where foundation hangs undrawn while the flow passes. Somewhere around this point, the follow-up question arrives. If the wax-producing window is 12 to 18 days, and the colony always has bees of every age, shouldn't there always be some wax-producing capacity present? Shouldn't the comb eventually get drawn regardless of timing? Yes, eventually. That's the word that costs honey. In a colony with continuous brood rearing, there are always bees in the 12 to 18 day window. But the question is not whether comb drawing happens. The question is whether it happens fast enough, and at what metabolic cost, to benefit the beekeeper during the nectar flow that is actually occurring. And this is where the mathematics of wax production become important, and where C.C. Miller's observations from 1915 become precise rather than historical. A pound of beeswax requires the metabolic conversion of approximately 6 to 8 pounds of honey. That figure is not contested. It is the basic thermodynamic reality of wax synthesis in bees. 6 pounds of honey to make 1 pound of wax. In a super with 10 frames of full depth foundation, the colony is looking at a wax investment of somewhere between 3 and 4 pounds before a single cell is available for honey storage. That 3 to 4 pounds of honey is not going into extractable surplus. It is going into the infrastructure for surplus. And the bees making that investment are the 12 to 18 day bees. The bees who are not yet foraging, who are not yet processing incoming nectar at forager capacity, who are doing the internal colony work that sustains the hive. When those bees are diverted in large numbers toward wax production, the colony's nectar processing chain shortens. Incoming nectar backs up. Foragers reduce flight frequency when they have no ready cells to deposit into. And the flow, which may last 3 weeks or 4, moves through a colony that is building its storage capacity instead of filling it. That is the metabolic trap. Foundation added too late in the season, when the nectar is already flowing and the demographic mix is already weighted toward foragers, forces the colony to choose between drawing comb and processing nectar at maximum rate. It cannot do both with full efficiency, and it typically cannot draw the comb fast enough to capitalize on the flow that triggered the decision to add the super in the first place. C.C. Miller understood this pattern across 5 decades of observation. In 50 Years Among the Bees, published in 1915, he was deliberate about the relationship between foundation timing and colony demographic state. Miller had watched enough seasons to recognize that the colonies which drew comb most efficiently were not necessarily the largest colonies in the apiary. They were the colonies where the foundation arrived when the largest proportion of the young bee workforce was in the wax gland active phase. He had seen big colonies ignore foundation, and small colonies draw it clean. The difference, as he observed it across decades, was always in timing, not in population size, not in queen quality, not in the character of the nectar flow. AI Root's documentation in ABC and XYZ of bee culture addressed the thermal and physiological conditions for wax secretion from a more technical angle. Root understood that the beekeeper who added foundation at the wrong moment was not simply adding storage space. He was adding a metabolic demand that the colony had to meet before that space could function. Root's practical recommendation, embedded in the larger discussion of super management, pointed toward early addition before the flow, not during it, as the management habit that consistently produced better results. Not because early addition was more convenient, but because early addition placed the foundation in front of the colony during a demographic window when the wax-producing workforce was at or approaching its seasonal peak. The 1930s Ohio commercial operations took this logic further. They tracked their comb drawing results by colony and by timing. What they documented, without the benefit of modern demographic analysis tools, was a consistent pattern. Colonies that received foundation 4 to 6 weeks before the anticipated peak of the primary nectar flow drew comb more completely, drew it faster, and produced more surplus honey than colonies that received foundation during or shortly before the flow. The difference was not explained by genetics or geography or management effort. It was explained by the demographic state of the colony at the moment the foundation arrived. The practical conclusion those Ohio beekeepers reached was this: drawn comb is not a passive resource that sits in storage until needed and gets added when the hive looks full. Drawn comb is the product of a specific demographic investment. It has to be made when the workforce that makes it is available to make it, and that workforce is available during a window that precedes the nectar flow, not during it. This is the insight that disappeared from mainstream beekeeping literature by the 1950s. The commercial expansion of the post-war period organized itself around the queen replacement and package bee model, around the addition of equipment when colonies appeared crowded, around management responses triggered by what was visible rather than what was coming. Foundation became something you added when the bees needed space. The idea that foundation needed to be added according to the demographic calendar of the colony, not the crowding threshold, had no product attached to it, no commercial simplification, no catalogue item. It required knowing what percentage of the colony's population was between 12 and 18 days old. It required working 6 weeks ahead of the flow rather than reacting to the flow's arrival, and so it quietly stepped out of the standard literature. The biology did not go with it. Queens still produce bees on the same developmental schedule. Wax glands still mature on the same 12 to 18 day timeline. Foundation still costs 6 to 8 pounds of honey per pound of wax. And the colony that receives foundation during the nectar flow still pays that metabolic cost at exactly the moment when honey production is the highest value use of every calorie in the hive. So what does the correctly timed approach actually look like in practice? The first adjustment is conceptual. Drawn comb is the most undervalued resource in most apiaries. A frame of fully drawn comb, clean cells, no brood residue, no old honey, ready for immediate laying or immediate nectar storage, is worth more to a productive colony than a frame of foundation at any point during the nectar flow. The beekeeper who has drawn comb in storage can add storage capacity to a colony during the flow without triggering any metabolic diversion. The nectar goes directly into cells that exist. The foragers keep flying. The 12 to 18 day bees keep doing nursing and processing work rather than wax production. Nothing is diverted. The beekeeper who has only foundation to add during the flow is in the metabolic trap, every time. The practical window for foundation addition, the window that 1930s Ohio commercial beekeepers were targeting deliberately, falls 4 to 6 weeks before the anticipated peak of the primary nectar flow. This is the same calendar logic that governs pre-flow splits and brood nest adjustments. The colony's young bee population at that moment is building toward its seasonal peak. Spring brood cycles have been running for several weeks. The emerging bees from those cycles are entering the 12 to 18 day window in increasing numbers. The thermal core of the colony is warm and sustained, and the nectar flow has not yet begun, so the wax secretion investment does not compete with honey processing. The bees draw the comb. The foundation disappears into drawn frames. By the time the flow arrives, those frames are ready. The colony enters peak nectar availability with storage infrastructure already in place, its entire young bee demographic free to focus on processing rather than building. The assessment before foundation addition is straightforward. Open the colony, the frames of emerging brood, capped pupae within a day or two of hatching, represent the next cohort of wax-producing bees. If those frames cover 4, 5, 6 positions in the brood nest, the colony has a substantial wax-producing surge approaching. That is the moment for foundation. Not when the bees are clustered wall to wall, not when the first nectar is coming in, when the next generation of young bees is about to emerge into a colony that still has calm thermal conditions and no competing metabolic demand. Temperature during foundation addition matters more than most beekeepers account for. Foundation added to a colony in cool late April conditions, when overnight temperatures are still dropping into the 40s, will sit untouched longer than the demographic window that should be drawing it. The wax glands are active, but the thermal conditions for wax secretion are not sustained. The foundation waits. By the time temperatures stabilize, the 12 to 18 day cohort has aged out. The window has moved. This is one reason early foundation addition sometimes fails even when the timing seems right by calendar. The thermal component of the equation was not met even when the demographic component was favorable. The practical correction is to add foundation when both conditions are simultaneously met. Young bee demographic peak approaching, and sustained daytime temperatures that allow the hive interior to hold its thermal range without stress. In most of the Ohio and Indiana region, this convergence happens reliably in the first 2 weeks of May, 4 to 6 weeks before the white clover flow peaks in mid to late June. That is the target window, not April when the nights are still cold, not June when the flow is underway. The first 2 weeks of May when the colony's demographic curve and its thermal conditions align. The beekeepers who came back to full supers in late June were not the beekeepers who added foundation when the bees looked crowded. They were the beekeepers who added it 6 weeks before the crowding mattered. They were working ahead of the visible signal, not in response to it. And they were building drawn comb as an asset, something the colony would have ready when it needed it, rather than something the colony had to produce during the window when every calorie should have been going into honey. Open that same super in early July after a flow and find it full. White drawn comb, frames heavy with capped honey, the evidence of a colony that entered the flow with infrastructure in place and spent the entire flow filling it. That result was not a function of the flow. It was not a function of the weather. It was a function of a decision made in early May when the foundation went in at the right demographic moment, and the colony drew it clean before the first drop of clover nectar came through the entrance. The flow rewarded a decision the beekeeper had already made. It had no opportunity to punish one that hadn't been made yet. We used to know when to add foundation. It was not a mystery. It was not a complicated calculation. It was a habit of working 6 weeks ahead and reading the colony's demographic state, rather than its crowding threshold. That habit got replaced by a simpler one. Add space when the bees need space. That simpler habit is not wrong, but it costs honey in the seasons where the demographic window and the crowding signal don't arrive together, which is most seasons. The biology C.C. Miller was observing in 1915 has not changed. The 12 to 18 day wax gland window is the same window it was then. The metabolic cost of wax production hasn't moved. The thermal requirements for efficient wax secretion are the same. And the nectar flow still rewards the colony that enters it with drawn comb and punishes the one still drawing it. If you've pulled a late season super and found foundation the bees never touched, that wasn't bad luck. That was a timing question that had an answer, and the answer was 6 weeks earlier than when the foundation went in. That's where the comb drawing window was. That's where it still is. If this kind of historically grounded, biology-first reasoning changes how you manage your supers and your comb, subscribe. There is more forgotten precision ahead. the kind that works before the problem becomes visible, not after.